Masechet Yoma, daf 53, an absolutely fascinating daf today with some very, very interesting agadot. We left the Kohen Gadol, we're going in chronological order, we left him putting the ketoret onto the coals in Kodesh Kodashim. And this follows the Pharisaic view that the ketoret should be performed while inside the Kodesh Kodashim, unlike the Sadducees who say that the Kohen Gadol puts the ketoret on the coals outside before he goes in and then enters with the coals smoking with the ketoret. We're going to start off today seeing the derivation of each view. So we start. Tenora banana braita. ונתן את הקטורת על האש לפני אדוני, שלא יתקן מבחוץ ויכניס, ועושים מליבן של סדוקים שאומרים יתקן מבחוץ ויכניס. So the pasuk, this pasuk 13, we have the pasukim here, says very clearly, you can start, we have one pasuk earlier, so you see the context, that the Kohen Gadol takes the coals from the Mizbeach, and he takes his handfuls of the ketoret, and he brings it mi bet la parochet, that's behind the curtain of the parochet in the Kodesh Kodashim. And once he's in there, venatan et ketoret ala esh, that's where he puts it on the fire. And then this pasuk we're gonna derive a lot of things from, so it's worth reading slowly. So he puts it on, and then v'chisa on the ketoret et kaporet, the cloud made from the ketoret spices will fill the room et kaporet. It will fill the cover and everything around it, so that he not die. Idea is that he shouldn't see directly what's on top of the aron, which is the kaporet. That's where the kiruvim are. Hashem speaks to the prophets from between the kiruvim, so that's the holiest spot. So it will fill all that area with the cloud of smoke. So you see, if you just read the Pisukim, Pishat, very clearly it says that first you go into the Kodesh Kodashim and then you make the Ketoret. So the Sadducees, the Pharisees / rabbis seem to have it correctly, and they say this pasuk and this derivation is here to exclude the opinion, the mind of the Sadokim, because they say the opposite, that the Kohen Gadol would perform it outside and then bring it in while it was already smoking. Now, very interestingly, the Braita asks, "My darush, what's the source for the Sadokim?" This is very unusual, right? A lot of times we'll have Bet Hillel, Bet Shammai. What's his source? What's the other source? But for the rabbis, the Tanaim, to look for the source for the Sadokim is quite interesting. It's at least a recognition that the Sadokim do follow try to follow their understanding of the Torah. So we'll see how they interpret it, and then we'll see how the rabbis deflect their proof. So my darush ki be'anan era'eh al hakaporet melamed sheyetaken mebachus ve'yachnis. So they're going to quote a different pasuk, the one in the beginning of the chapter, verse 2. Here it says, Al yabo bechol et el hakodesh. Aaron cannot come any time into the kodesh, inside the parochet, into the kodesh kodashim, opnei kaporet, shadun velo yamut, so that he not die. Ki be'anan era'eh al hakaporet. Rather, this key is a bit ambiguous. It could be understood in multiple ways. The Sadducees are understanding it as he should not come any time. Ki, meaning rather only be'anan era'eh al hakaporet. Rather only come in with a cloud. So you see, coming in with a cloud, that means you have to make the cloud earlier before you come in, and then you enter with the cloud. Otherwise, he's going to enter empty-handed with no cloud, and he will be there and see into the Kodesh Kodashim, and that will be a problem. So it seems that they have a point also with this pasuk. That God is there in the Kodesh Kodashim, and he has to come in with the cloud smoke already. How can the rabbis deflect this? This word "ki," I think that the rabbis can understand it in a different way as because. Don't come in anytime because I will be seen there in a cloud. In other words, according to the rabbis, the presence, the manifestation of God is the cloud itself. So that when he comes in beforehand, there's kind of nothing there. It's okay. And then he creates the cloud And so because I'm in the cloud, don't come in any time. Come in only, right, after you do the continuation, the par ben bakar lechatat ayil leolah. You do all the Yom Kippur service only on that day when you have all these things done. Then you can come in, right, because I'm going to be in the cloud. So for the rabbis, it's that the cloud itself is the manifestation of God, and therefore wouldn't make any sense to make it outside and bring it in. According to the Sadducees, it's don't come in because I'm there. Rather, make a smoke screen. So for them, the cloud is not a manifestation of God, but rather a smoke screen so that you don't see God. So it's really quite opposite and very different philosophical views that are behind these two opinions. Okay, anyway, that's their proof from Gibeon. So now, Chachamim say, okay, what are you going to find? You have Pasuk Bet. So that's a reasonable way to read Pasuk Bet. But what about Pasuk Yud Gimel, the one that we quoted the first? And that is clear that that's talking about the order. And it says, only when after you go in, then you put the Ketorot on the coals. So imken matamud ki be'anan era al hakaporet. So the Sadducees could say back, okay, then what do you do with ki be'anan? It has to be in a cloud. I gave my interpretation before, which I think is the peshat. But the rabbis here give a different answer. Melamed shenoten ba ma'aleh ashan. Teaches that even according to the rabbis, there's another ingredient besides all the ketoret spices, the ones that we read every day. There's another one called Maleh Ashan. That's a special herb that you put it on and it just creates smoke. And that, the rabbis agree, is done outside of Kodesh Kodashim, right? So according to the rabbis, he gets the pan, right? And he's walking with it. And then before he goes in, he just puts one herb, Maleh Ashan. He creates a smoke. And then he goes in with a smoke screen. So the rabbis are agreeing to with the Sadducees in that one aspect, that they should come in with a smoke screen. And only then, when he's inside, then he puts the ketoret. And the ketoret, that's the main service, and that's, but that only is done inside. And the rabbis learn, how do they know that you should have a smoke screen? Well, the truth is we already had a quote from Pasuk Bet. And now it's going to, now asked strangely again, and how do you know that you should have the smoke riser? And it quotes the second part of Pasuk Yud Gimel, v'chisa, that is going to cover everything. So the Gemara will ask in a second, why do you need two pisukim to prove the same thing, that you need the smoke riser herb? Okay, anyway, therefore, if you did not put this maleh ashan herb, or if you missed any other of the ingredients of the ketoret, chayav mita. So we learn that from these pisukim, because it says, right, don't come in anytime, or else, right, v'lo yamut. So it means if you do come in improperly, then yamut. All right, so that's the braita. Now we're going to analyze it. Why do you need a separate separate pasuk to teach me that if I come in if the Kohen Gadol comes in improperly, if he's missing an ingredient, there's chayav mita? You could just learn it from the fact that he's going in for no purpose. If the Kohen Gadol or anyone goes into Kodesh Kodashim for no purpose, that itself is chayav mita. Forget that you're doing the ketoret the wrong way. If you do the ketoret the wrong way, you didn't do ketoret, and then therefore you came in for no purpose. So that by itself would be chayav mita. You don't need another law. So we're going to have a couple of answers to this. A talking about a case where the Kohen Gadol went in unawares. I mean, I assume he knows where he's going, but maybe he was unaware that it was prohibited, that there was a punishment for going in without preparation for no reason. So he's not going to get mitah for the entering, but he knew that he was missing an ingredient, and he went in anyway, and that was mezid, and he knew that was chayav mitah. So there is a case where you could be not chayav mitah for going in, and yes, chayav mitah for doing the ketoret improperly. That's one answer. I can even tell you another case where he was mezid. He knew that he's not allowed to go in for no reason, and he knew he was doing ketoret improperly. Maybe he brought in two ketorets. Like when he entered, he also brought the regular ketoret that you do every morning. So, and he did that properly. So therefore, he came in properly, so he's not chayav mitah for entering the kodesh, and the other one was improper, so he's only going to get chayav mitah for the improper serving of the ketoret. So on entering, he's not chayav because he did in fact bring in a perfectly fine ketoret, one of them. But the other ketoret, since it was missing, he would be chayav mitah for that. Okay, so we have two answers to that question. Now, going back, Amar Mor in the Baraita, now this is going on the double proof, right? We proved it once from Pasuk Bet, Ki Be'anan, and then it said, and how do you know? Bechisa. Well, are you bringing a proof from one Pasuk to support another Pasuk? You already have one. Why do you need both? So we're going to have a couple of answers to this. Amar Rav Yosef Hachika Amar, En li ela ale ma'ale ashan. If I only had one Pasuk, I would only know that I bring the leaf of the smoke rising plant. Ikad ma'ale ashan minayin. How do I know that I have to bring also the root of the smoke riser plant? So that's why I have two pesukim that I should bring the leaf and the root and burn both of them. That's Rabbi Yosef. Wait a minute, it should be the opposite. You're assuming that the leaf is more impactful than the root, and you need a second pasuk to teach me the root. But look at the story. The Tanya Natan ba ikad ma'ale ashan hayam etamer ve'oleh kemakelat shemegel l'shmei korah. If you just put the root, that by itself will make the smoke rise like a column all the way up until it gets to the roof. And then once it gets to the roof, it spreads out over the ceiling and it comes right down on the walls, and the whole room is going to be full of smoke. This is very interesting. It's quoting pasuk in Yeshaya. Yeshaya is not talking about Ketoret. He's talking about his great vision, right, of the God on the throne and all the angels and everything. And so this is quite interesting that it's quoting this pasuk in this regard, because it has nothing to do with incense. And rather, it's clear that the rabbis are looking to the vision of Yeshaya as a model, right? He sees that in the vision when he sees God in heaven, but we are actually recreating that on earth. So even the pasuk only said you should make smoke so that the smoke will cover the kaporet. But now this Baraita says it will it will fill up the whole room. This whole room idea comes from Yeshaya. So this whole room is God's throne room, and therefore all needs to be filled. Okay, the point for us is that all he did was put the root, and the root by itself is the most impactful part. So it should be the opposite. So Abaye switches the order from Rav Yosef and says, if I only one pasuk, I would know the root. And second pasuk comes to teach me that also the leaf, add a little more, it's even better. Okay. Amar Rav Sheshat Amar, En li ela ohel moed shebamidbar, shilo bet olami minayin, tamud lomar v'chisa. So another answer altogether. Why do I need two pasukim to teach me that I need the smoke riser? That if I only had one pasuk, I would know that they did it in Ol Moed, in the desert. That's the context that the Torah is talking about. How would I know in the future, in the Mishkan and Shiloh, and this first and second Bet HaMikdash? That's why I have another pasuk to teach me that. So the Gemara rejects this because the pasuk at the end in Vayikra 16:16, it says you're going to do this. So you do this when it dwells within you. In other words, forever, not only in the desert, but wherever the Shekhinah is. So that would include Shiloh and Bet HaMikdash as well. So you don't need a second pasuk for that. We know the whole Yom Kippur service you're going to do forever. Oh, so if I only had one pasuk, I would know that on Yom Kippur you have to bring it. How about the rest of the days? Every day we bring a ketoret. The second pasuk comes to teach that yes, every day you should bring the smoke riser. It won't be in the Kodesh Kodashim, but rather in the Kodesh on the Mizbach HaKetoret. That also should be filled with smoke. Okay, so that is necessary. Yet another answer. I need one pasuk to tell me that it's a mitzvah to do. The second one to tell me that even b'di avad, if I forgot to put the smoke riser, the whole thing is no good, right? So it's an absolutely, and not only is it a positive mitzvah, it's an absolutely necessary, indispensable part of the mitzvah. We saw this a couple of times already, that when you have a pasuk that says something twice, the second one comes to teach me that it's indispensable. And finally, Rava Amar had le'onesh v'had le'azhara. You know, I need two pasukim. One is the warning, and one is the punishment. In general, whenever you have Torah gives a punishment and says this is going to be chayam mitah, you need another pasuk beforehand. In this case, it's actually afterwards, but it doesn't matter. You need a second pasuk to teach me that a warning, right? Because you don't punish someone unless you warn them first. So Torah needs to say it twice. It has to say it's not allowed, and then another time to say the punishments. A good example of this is all the arayot that are found twice in Sefer Vayikra. And one time it just says these are all the things that are not allowed. The other ones it says these are it adds punishments. So that's a good example of it adding punishments. Okay, if you look at the order here, interestingly, Rava is before Rav Asher. Rava's fourth generation. Rav Asher is sixth generation. Why is it called Rav Asher first and then Rava? I think it's because this theme of Onesh and Azhara is going to continue with the next section, and so therefore it's quoting it last so that we can go right into the further discussion about it. So Tanya. Rabbi Eliezer Omer velo yamut onesh ki be'anan era'eh azhara. So we can look at this in the pasuk. This is pasuk bet, right? Don't come in any time. Right? Velo yamut ki be'anan. So velo yamut, that clearly is the punishment. And then ki be'anan, make sure to bring in anan, make sure to do the smoke riser, right? That is the warning, right? So even though it's out of order, it has to say that because velo yamut is clearly the punishment. Okay, so put them back to back. And so we have both. That's fine. Now, question regarding Bnei Haron. Bnei Haron, seemingly this was what they did, right? They did something wrong in terms of they're bringing the ketoret, and so that's why they got chayab mitah. Now the question is, when was this warning and punishment issued? So the beginning of this pasuk says, right? The first pasuk says Acharemot Shnei Ben Aharon, and then it brings this. So were both of these said to Moshe and taught to the people before the story of Aharon? Right, we're not Acharemot here. The story of Ben Aharon happened back in Parashat Shemini in chapter 9. So this whole thing happened way before. Okay, so can it be that this was all before? No, it can't be, because it says Acharemot. So Acharemot, then Hashem told Moshe and told him this law. So it can't be that it was all before. So maybe both the warning and the punishment were said after Aaron died. No, this pasuk era'eh is using a future tense. I will be seen in a cloud. So it didn't happen. That means it didn't happen yet. So this must have been talking about before Yom HaShemini, because on Yom HaShemini, God is seen in Ohel Moed. So this must have been before. So in fact, it's clear that the warning was given before the story of Bnei Aaron, and the punishment was said after, and that's why they're both here. Just one drags the other along, but one of them is not in chronological order. Talmuda wants to clarify, how did we know this, that one is before? Since it says God, I will be seen, that means it must have been given at a time when God was not seen yet, and that's before the story, before Yom HaShemini, before the story of the death of Nadav and Abihu. So now the question is, then why were they punished? If the penalty had not been given yet, then how could they be punished? Right? We said, right, you cannot allow to punish unless first you give the warning and say what the punishment is. In fact, anytime you have two witnesses and they see someone committing a crime, they have to say, do you know this is not allowed? Do you know if you do this, then you're going to be chayav this and that? And they have to say, yes, we know, and we're still going to do it. Only then can one give punishment. So not only in practice, but also in the Torah's retelling of it, there has to be both of these before any story in the Torah where someone gets the death penalty. So therefore, since both are not before, it can't be that Nadav and Abihu died because of this sin that they missed bringing the Ma'aleh Ashan. So rather, it must be something else. Rather, their sin was a different one, that they taught a halacha in front of their teacher, Moshe. And one is not allowed to do that. My darush, where do you see that? It says, "V'natenu ben Aaron kohen esh al mizbeach, af al pi sha'esh yoredet min hashamayim misva la'abi min ha'hejot." So the halacha that they taught was in fact a true halacha, and the halacha is that, and Vayikra 1, it says that Bnei Aaron should put fire on the Mizbeach. And that teaches that even though fire comes down from heaven, nevertheless, it's a mitzvah that the humans should also bring fire. It's a true halacha, but they said it themselves without conferring with Moshe first. And that was their sin. Okay, this is a bit of a darasha, but only a bit of a darasha, because if you look at the Pesukim themselves, you see that in fact, in the Peshat, it says, Moshe and Aaron, they do everything that they're supposed to on Yom HaShemini, Vayibarichu Ta'am, Vayera, Kebod Adonai El Kol Ha'am. And God's presence came, Vateseh Esh Minifnei Adonai, Vatochal Esh, and a fire came down from before God and consumed the offerings, and everybody saw and fell on their faces. So in other words, everything was done successfully as was planned. And the next pasuk is, now, Nadav and Avihu are doing their own thing. Who asked them to do anything, right? We had a good conclusion. Everything was done. They wanted to kind of steal the show. And so they brought Esh Sarah, and this is Vateseh Esh Mifnei Adonai, the same words as before, but now instead of consuming the korbanot, it consumes them. So you see that the rabbis have a good point here. In pointing out their putting themselves forward in front of Moshe, and that was the essence of their sin, according to this interpretation. And so that solves the problem before. But so even though the Maleh Ashan does not have to do with their particular sin, we do learn that Maleh Ashan is necessary, and that we have the warning and the punishment for it. Okay, good. Now, next halacha altogether, next part of the Mishnah says, Yatzao ba'lo derech kinisato. After the Kohen Gadol puts the ketoret on the coals, he leaves, and when he leaves, he goes out the same way that he entered. Now, I think the Mishnah, the Peshat, is saying something simple, that he goes the same path. Remember, he has to go, he'll go back to the curtain, and then he'll make a left turn, and he'll go to the entrance, the exit of the curtain, go through the curtains, come out of the south part, and then he has to go outside. So in other words, don't take a different path, take the same path. But the Gemara is going to learn something in addition to that, besides just the path, that he has to walk backwards. So how do we know that? Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Kera vayabo Shlomo labama asher beGibeon Yerushalayim. Okay, what we're going to see here is that we're going to learn the general law, like what we do now when you leave a Bet Knesset, right? You don't just walk out, you walk to the side, right? You face the Aron, walk out backwards. If you look, you see many people do this. Sometimes I see at the Kotel, people walk, when they're leaving the Kotel, they walk backwards all the way up the ramp until they're back on the big upper plaza. So this is a halacha, and this is where we learn it from. So that we learn it from Shlomo. This is a pasuk in Divrei Amim. The pasuk is very curious. It's very actually hard to read. Shlomo labama asher beGibeon. That sounds like Shlomo came to the bama, is a high place where people made sacrifices. That was in Gibeon, and then it says Yerushalayim. What do you mean Yerushalayim? Did he go to Gibeon or Yerushalayim? He came from Yerushalayim. So maybe it means Vayabo Shlomo Yerushalayim. If you just had those words, he would come Yerushalayim. So that's how they're reading it. That Vayabo Shlomo from the bama, even though it says la bama, make believe it says meha bama should be Gibeon, and he went to Yerushalayim. So the Gemara is puzzled by this pasuk, as they should be. What's the point? What's the connection between Gibeon and Yerushalayim? Why would it put Yerushalayim if you're saying he came to Yerushalayim? Why are you sticking Gibeon in there? So you see that the pasuk is combining into one his journey there and his journey on the way back. So his leaving from Gibeon to Yerushalayim was like his entrance from Yerushalayim to Gibeon. So just like when during his trip there from Yerushalayim to Gibeon, he was facing forwards, meaning facing the Bama. And in Gibeon, that's where he's going. He's going to make sacrifices there. So too, when he leaves Gibeon, he's going to back to Yerushalayim. He's facing the Bama in Gibeon and walking backwards. Does this mean he walked backwards the entire journey? Probably not. At least he walked backwards some of the way out of respect to the Bama until it was out of sight. And then he went to Yerushalayim. So we learn from here that so too the Kohen Gadol, when he leaves the Kodesh Kodashim, should walk backwards outside until he gets outside. And that's proper respect for the Kodesh Kodashim, for the Shekhinah that's in there. Okay, now this is a very curious way of learning reading these Pesukim, because in Divrei Yamim, it just has a very short version. In Sefer Melachim, you see the full version of the story. And here, you see the context, where that says, Vayehov Shlomo et Adonai lechet bechukot David aviv. Shlomo followed all the right laws correctly, like did his father. Rak ba'bamot u'mizabech u'maktir, except for one thing that he did that was incorrect. He was giving sacrifices on the bamot, right, on those high places. And so that's a negative thing. And the next pasuk says, "Vayelech hamelech Gibeon al lizbach sham, ki habama gedola 1,000 olot ya'aleh Shlomo al mizbeach hahu." He went to Gibeon and to sacrifice there, and he made 1,000. It sounds like quite a lot. So he made 1,000 sacrifices there. And there he has a dream. You know the whole dream. Hashem says, "Ask anything you want." He says, "I want wisdom." He says, "Fine, but listen, always follow the laws of the Torah." The middle part sounds like God is emphasizing, follow the Torah, right? And then he wakes up and he vayavo Yerushalayim. This is relevant to us. Vayamod lifnei Adon berit Adonai. Vayalalot vayashalamim vayas mishte l'chol avadav. So you've noticed the Adon is in Yerushalayim. This is very important. So he goes back to Yerushalayim, where in front of the Adon, and he makes another more sacrifices there. So what you see here is that going to the Bama in Gibeon doesn't seem to have been the correct thing to do. Rather, right, he left Yerushalayim, left the Adon to do this Bamot, which is incorrect. He has a dream and says, "Okay, God, give me wisdom." And right after that, he does the correct thing, which is go to the Adon and make some sacrifices there. You don't need to make 1,000 on a huge Bama, right? Rather, this is the most proper. Okay, so now the Divrei Yamim skips most of this, all this story, and instead just has Vayevosh Shlomo labama asher b'Gibeon, and then Yerushalayim. The confusion of this pasuk seems to be that Divrei Yamim is taking the pasuk in Melachim and saying Vayavo Yerushalayim. See, Vayavo Yerushalayim, Vayavo Yerushalayim, and inserting it labama asher b'Gibeon, like inserting the whole story before just in 3 words, but coming to Yerushalayim. It's almost as if Divrei Yamim, which often does, skips anything negative about David and Shlomo. Is skipped in Divrei Yamim, and so this whole story about the Bamot is skipped. Okay, now why is this so interesting to me? Because look what happened. According to this midrash, Shlomo went from Yerushalayim, left the Adon, went to the Bama, made sacrifices there, and then walked backwards with his face to the Bama, his back to the Adon. This is mind-blowing, right? This is the exact opposite what you should do. That we're learning from here, you should have your face towards the Adon, the Kohen Gadol, but here Shlomo had his back to the Adon. He was really facing the wrong way the whole time. This whole story is actually quite negative about him. And yet, the Gemara is using this as a source for the Kohen Gadol to have his face towards the Adon. So I don't know what to make of this. Maybe the rabbis are assuming that everything Shlomo did was correct, and yes, the Bama is supposed to be there before the Bet HaMikdash was built, so it's okay, or something like that. I'm not sure. I have a suggestion, only a suggestion. If you don't like it, make believe I didn't say anything, which is that maybe the rabbis are, you see before that they had talking about a tension between the Sadducees and the rabbis. Sadducees are the Kohanim who did things the wrong way. It's true, they were in the Bet HaMikdash and all that, but they did things the wrong way. That was all negative. They were Chayab Mitah, really, because they did it the wrong way. And so there is tension between the rabbis and the Kohanim. Maybe, just maybe, the rabbis are quoting Shlomo, who did the wrong thing, right? Who is putting his face towards the korbanot and his back towards the Adon, as a subtle criticism of those Kohanim who were corrupt and who were doing the wrong thing. They had their face only towards the things in the Bet HaMikdash and their back to the Adon, meaning they're back to the rabbis who taught them what the Torah is supposed to mean. So these Kohanim who are doing this, of course, they're saying, yes, it's proper when a good Kohen is doing it to always be facing the Adon. But the point of bringing Shlomo, maybe subtle, maybe it's too subtle, is a subtle criticism of Kohanim who are not paying attention to the Torah, the Adon, as taught by the rabbis. Okay, that's my thesis. I have a little bit more proof coming up, so keep this in mind. Now, so too, anytime you have Kohanim, Leviim, or Yisrael, everybody takes a turn that they will serve, even Yisrael come and they're the designated audience, and they say prayers during the Avodah. Whenever they finish and they leave, they should not walk out, but rather they should walk out backwards, and they could turn their head to the side so they see where they're going. They don't have to bump into anything, but their face is backwards, even though their face is turned. And now look what the Gemara says. Not only is this true in the Bet HaMikdash, when the teacher is leaving, when the student is leaving from before the presence of his teacher, he should not turn around and turn his back on his teacher and walk out, but rather he should walk out backwards and only turn his face and go out. So I think this is fascinating that the rabbis are making this connection and saying, we learn, you know what we learned from the Kohen? To do this with one's teacher, right? With one's rabbi. And that's the real, it's an equivalent. Right? Leaving the Adon is like leaving one's teacher who teaches the person what's in the Adon, what's in the Torah. So you see, once again, the rabbis are emphasizing the prominence of knowledge and teaching of Torah, raising it up to the level of Kohanim, and I think over here, even saying Kohanim who are doing the wrong thing, like Bamot, is actually the opposite, the wrong way. They're facing the wrong way. They're not facing the Adon. Here's some examples. When Rabbi Elazar would leave from before the presence of Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Elazar is a student. Now, it can happen both ways. Either the teacher could leave first or the student could leave first. So let's say the teacher left first. So when Rabbi Yochanan, the teacher, left, Rabbi Elazar would bow down and stay in his place. He wouldn't leave out of humility until Rabbi Yochanan disappeared from his sight, and then Rabbi Elazar would go on his way. When Rabbi Elazar wanted to leave first, he would walk backwards until he could no longer even see Rabbi Yochanan. Another example, Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef is the famous Amorah who was blind. Now, Rav, when he left before him, he would walk backwards. Apparently, Rav didn't get the message that you could look backwards to see where you're going. He would just go backwards, and he wouldn't see where he was going, and he would bump his feet on the threshold, on the door, in the doorway, until that they was all bloody, because every time he left, he would keep bumping into them, and he developed wounds, and there was blood on the threshold. So this is kind of like a strange story, but it's showing the extent to which Rava would have absolute deference and humility and walk backwards, even though it hurt him every time. Okay, I don't know if it's saying that you should really, wound yourself, but right, it's giving an extreme example. Rav Yosef was blind, so Rav Yosef never saw what was happening, and Rava just did it out of respect, even though Rav Yosef didn't see. So one day, some people told Rav Yosef, by the way, Rava does this, and he bangs his feet every time, walking backwards. So Rav Yosef appreciated and said, right, may it be God's will that you lift your head over the city. In other words, you should become Rosh Yeshiva, the head of the city, a teacher for everybody. Okay, that's a beautiful story. Now we learn yet another thing from this. Besides, if you're in the Bet HaMikdash and you leave, you go backwards, and also before your rabbi, but also something that we do all the time when we pray the Amidah. Amar Rabbi Alexandri. אמר רבי יהושע בן לוי, המתפלל צריך שיפסיע 3 פסיעות la'achora ve'achar kach yiten shalom. Someone who's praying, after when you're done at the end of the Amidah, you should walk 3 steps backwards, and then you should say hello, shalom. You should say shalom. Now, who are you saying shalom to? It could be that you're saying shalom to the other people around you. We have a Syrian custom to that in the beginning. You kind of greet everybody. But this is saying shalom at the end. Kind of you left the presence of Kadosh Baruch Hu, and now you're back to society. So you greet the people around you. Or it could be saying shalom to the Shekhinah. So either way, we do this by saying Oseh shalom imromav hu b'rachamav yaseh shalom. So right, that's how we say shalom, which is actually a call for peace both in heaven and on earth to those around us. So it fills both. Amar le Rav Mordechai. I'm going to show you that this Rav Mordechai is not actually an Amora, but rather a later Gaon. And his statement got stuck into the Gemara suspiciously, but I'll prove it in a second. He adds to this, Kevan shepasah shalosh pisiot achorav, hatam ibayale lemekam. Is after you go 3 steps backwards at the end of the Amidah, you should stay there. Don't run, just go 3 steps back and then run away. Sometimes I see teenagers, they 3 steps back and then they're off on their way. That is disrespectful. Shows you never really wanted to be there. Rather, stay there. How long do you have to stay there? When we're praying with the minyan, we have a custom that we take 3 steps back and we stay there until the beginning of the chazara, right? Until the kedusha. Then we take 3 steps forward for the kedusha. If you're praying by yourself, then just stay there for a little while. Just gather yourself together, and then you walk away. Okay. Mashal tamid niftar merabo. Im chozer la'atar domeh lekerev sheshav al ki'o. It's like similar to a student who leaves his teacher. He walks backwards, right? All respectful. Im chozer, if he just goes immediately and comes back, this is like a dog returning to its vomit. It eats something it doesn't like, vomits it, then it goes and licks it. Disgusting. Why? What did you want to leave it? Did you want to get rid of it? Or do you like it? So you're saying contradictory messages. So too, if someone takes 3 steps back and then immediately returns, the contradiction means you didn't really have a sense of the space around you, that you were before Shekhinah and then you left Shekhinah. You wait a while and then it resets everything. Okay, then if you want to walk back, then you walk back after that. Okay, good. Tanya Namehachi, we have a baraita that supports this. What does it support? Pay attention to what it's about to support. Hamit palel sarich sheyafsiya shalosh pisiot achorav v'achad kach yiten shalom. You should go 3 steps back and then say shalom. If you didn't do that, better not to have prayed at all. Amazing thing, right? Better not to have prayed. Yeah, I guess it shows while you were there, if you don't take 3 steps back and say shalom, it means that during the Amidah, you didn't recognize you were in holy space. You were before divine Shekhinah. So if you didn't realize that the whole time, better not to have prayed at all. So it's really that ritual at the end that shows one was having proper kavanah. Okay, now this baraita is supporting the idea that you should take 3 steps back and say shalom. When did we say that? Up here. That's what Rabbi Alexandri said. 3 steps back and then say shalom. After that, Mordechai said, after that, when you take 3 steps back, you should wait there a little while. Usually, if you have Tanya Namehachi, it's a baraita supporting the last thing said. The baraita does not support what Mordechai said. Rather, it supports what Rabbi Alexandri says. So this makes you see that Mordechai's statement is suspicious, right? Because it doesn't. Right? The baraita goes on what Rabbi Alexandri says. And in fact, if we look at the manuscripts, you'll see something very interesting. This is a statement of Amar Rav Mordechai. It's found in the Vilna printed edition. It's also found in the Venice first edition. And it's missing in almost all the manuscripts. It's only found in this British manuscript, but there it's in brackets. That means it was added in later. It was not part of the original manuscript. It's also in one Yemenite manuscript, which was written in around 1700 after printing. So this is clearly influenced by the printing. The other Yemenite manuscripts, the Geniza fragments, the Sephardic manuscripts do not have this line. So this line actually does not belong in the Gemara. It's a comment by a Gaon named Rav Mordechai, who is adding another halacha. When you take 3 steps, also wait there. Okay, very nice halacha, and we should follow it. But it's not actually part of the Gemara. If you take it out, then Rabbi Alexandri's statement flows easily into the baraita that proves it. Okay, so that's super interesting. Now, ומשום שמיה אמרו שנותן שלום לימין ואחר כך לשמאל, שנאמר מימינו אש דת לעמו, ועומד, יפול מסלך אלף ולבבה מימינך. Someone was asking about the right hand yesterday and the importance of it. So Shemaya, as in, Shemaya of Talion, said that when you greet, you should greet to the right side first and then the left side. Or see, the greeting here sounds like you're greeting, or rather taking your leave from the Shekhinah. So God's right hand, mimino, God holds the Torah, the law, in his right hand. So the right hand is more important. And it also says another pasuk in Tehillim that when God fights, 1,000 will fall at your, or when a hero fights, when God fights, 1,000 will fall on one side and 10,000 on the right side. So you see 10,000, the right side is much more powerful than the left side. So therefore, we should take leave of the right side is more important. So now, why does Beraita bring two Pesukim? Why should I have to bring two Pesukim from Devarim and from Tehillim? If you only had the one in Devarim, you might say, that's just the way most people usually, if they're carrying something, they carry it in the right hand. So God's carrying the law, it's in his right hand. That doesn't mean anything. That's what everybody does. Tashema, therefore, the pasuk comes and gives a comparison and says one side, meaning the left, is 1,000, the right side is 10,000. So the right side is certainly more significant, and therefore one should bow to the right side, towards the right side. We'll see in a second what that means. Rava saw his colleague Abaye that when he finished Amidah, he would bow first to the right side, meaning to Abaye's right. Rava corrects him and says, not your right. It should be your left to have a yemino shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because that's God's right. God's right is the more important. Therefore, you should bow to the left, which is God's right. Amar Rav Chiya, vered Rav Huna, hazen ehud labaye v'Rabba depasrei lehu shelosh pesiot bechriya achat. Furthermore, about Rava and Abaye, that when they went back, they bowed once and then walked back and went this way and that way while bowing, rather than what they didn't do is, bow, take a step, bow, take another step, and then bow again. Rather, all the steps are done in one bowing. Okay, so this is where we learn all of the halachot that we use all the time when we say the Amidah. All right, and now we get to the next part of the Baraita. So then the Kohen Gadol would say a short prayer outside. In other words, after he did the Ketoret, he would go out to the Kodesh and say the prayer there. Ma Misaleh, what did he pray? Rava bar Rav Ada v'Ravin bar Rav Ada. Tarva mishmet Amri. The Kohen Gadol, one chance he has to, Kodesh on Yom Kippur, after he just went to the Kodesh Kodashim. What does he pray? That it should be a year of rain and heat. Shechunam al yutahi. Wait, is that good? That should be hot. Rather, scratch that. What he meant to say is, if it's going to be very hot, let it be rainy. If it's very hot, you need even more rain so the crops won't dry out. So basically, they're praying for economic prosperity, a good rain. And furthermore, they added more things that he would pray. They prayed that the house of Judah should not depart from being ruling, have the power over Israel, that the kingship, the dynasty should always be from them. And Israel should not require that sustenance from each other. People shouldn't be so poor that they have to rely on each other. And also, do not listen to the tefillah of people who are traveling. This is quite amazing. The Kohen Gadol is actually praying an anti-prayer. The people that are traveling are going to pray for no rain, because it's very hard. You don't want it to rain when in the middle while they're traveling. So they would actually, the Kohen Gadol would have to make a prayer to say, don't listen to the prayers of the travelers, even though it's going to be hard for them to travel while it's raining. For the greater good, the farmers need rain, so don't listen to them. Okay, so that's all the prayers I would say, but they were all in Hebrew except for this one about Yehuda, which was in Aramaic. I guess that was from a different source. Anyway, that's interesting. Now we have a a funny story. Rabbi Hanina, a great sage from the second Bet HaMikdash times, he was traveling. Sheda mitra aleh. Started raining while he's traveling. So he wasn't happy about that. So he prays, says, everybody's happy, everybody's okay, they're comfortable because they're home and they're farmers and they like the rain, and I should be suffering? Is that fair that everybody should be happy except for me? So Pesach Mitra, God listened to the prayer and stopped all the rain. When he got home, he said another prayer. God, is it fair that everybody should be suffering because they have no rain and they're farmers, and I should be okay? That's not fair, right? Not everybody's suffering. Atamitra. So it started raining again. So to be Chanina, was such a tzaddik, he could like turn on the rain and off like a switch with his prayers. Amar Rav Yosef, Maya hanya lesilotet echon gadol legabe Rabbi Chanina ben dosa. So Rav Yosef said, wow, look how amazing the effect is of the Kohen Gadol compared to Rabbi Chanina ben dosa. In other words, no effect. Even though the Kohen Gadol says, don't listen to the travelers, Rabbi Chanina ben dosa is so great that even though he's a traveler, God listens to his prayer and not the prayer of the Kohen Gadol. Okay, this is a fascinating story to sum up the theme that I've been building this whole time. There's actually a power struggle here between the great sage and the Kohen Gadol. And even though the Kohen Gadol, that one prayer he says, don't listen to the travelers, nevertheless, the prayer of the sage, of the rabbi, wins out. And so I think this is another stage, another example of that struggle, and the rabbis once again saying it's the power of Torah over the power of Kehuna. And last baraita before the Mishnah, Tenor Banan Maaseh B'Kohen Gadol Echad She'arich B'Tfilato V'Nimnu Echav HaKohanim Likanes Acharav. So one time, the Kohen Gadol was going very long in his tefillah, and the rabbis went in to see what happened to him. They started going in. What happened to him? They were worried. As they started going in, Kohen Gadol came out. He was fine. They asked him, how come you prayed for so long? What, do you have a problem? I was praying a long time because I was praying for you. I was praying for the Bet HaMikdash that it shouldn't be destroyed. I guess there was already a threat from Romans, problems happening. This is all right, but don't do that again, right? Don't do that on a regular basis, because we say in the Mishnah taught that he would not say a long prayer so that people would not be afraid. After all, we just saw above that the Kohen Gadol, he misses one ingredient, he does something wrong, and then he'll be chayav mita. So that's why everybody's afraid. So therefore, it's more important not to keep everybody in suspense, that they should not be fearful, than that you should have a long prayer. Just make it short and sweet and get out. Okay, let's begin the next Mishnah. Mishenital Aron Even Haita Shama Mimot Nevi'im Rishonim Ushetiya Haita Nikret. So when the Aron used to be there, the Aron was right in the Kodesh Kodeshim. When the Aron was taken away, the Gemara will notice this language of taken away rather than nignaz, which we saw yesterday, that it was hidden away. So when there was no more Aron, there was instead the foundation stone. It was there from the early Nevi'im. It was called Shitiyah, which seems to mean foundation. Hagavo min haaretz shalosh espaot, 3 finger breadths higher than the rest of the ground. That's how you could tell that demarcation. Va'aleh hayanoten, and the Kohen Gadol would take the coals, the pan of coals, and put it there on the foundation stone. Natal, this is a view, by the way. Now, if you would go in the Dome of the Rock, this is what you would see under that golden dome. Natal et adam misha memares bo. Remember, the guy outside is on the 4th step. He's still stirring the blood of the pod. So the Kohen Gadol goes out and gets that blood. Nichnas makom shenichnas, ve'amad makom she'amad, ve'hizam enu achat lemala ve'sheba lemata. And so he goes to the place where he was. It doesn't say the whole thing again of exactly where he was. I think it keeps it ambiguous so that, when there was an Adon there, he would go to the place of the Adon. When there's no Adon, he went to that place. That would the Adon would have been the same place that was there before when he did where he did the Ketoret. And he sprinkled 1 up and 7 down. This means it is not up or down, because they're all going on the floor. Rather, 1 up means underhand, right? He'd throw it up, and 7 overhand, meaning he would sprinkle them down. And the point is not that anyone are going higher or lower, but rather maslif means someone who's doing the whipping. When they had official lashes, and someone gets lashes on their back, the lashes they would start from the top of the back and go down, right, all in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so too the sprinkling should be in that order. So here's one underhand, that's the one that's up, and put one that would be one spot on the floor, and then 7 times down, 8 altogether, which is a nice berit number. Remember the berit on Yom Kippur, and so it goes straight down the line, like someone who was being whipped. Interesting. That's comparing it to something being whipped. Maybe this is kind of atonement, kind of like punishment. And he would count. When he's done with the blood of the pod, he goes and puts it back on the pedestal that's in the sanctuary. So now he's done with the pod. Now he has to go bring the sa'ir. This is, remember, the 2 sa'irim. One of them is with Hashem. That's the one he's going to go get. Remember, he had them facing. They were waiting there patiently this whole time. Shechato, he does shechita on the sa'ir. That's Hashem. And he collects it in a cup. Apparently here he does both, and he can finish it off. The goat is smaller, easier to slaughter than the bull. And he takes that in his right hand. He takes that and he goes in back into Kodesh Kodashim, the same place he was before. And so he does the same sprinkling with the blood of the goat. Same thing. And he goes and places it on the second pedestal that was out in the Kodesh. So here you go. Here's one pedestal, and then he would do the shechita, and then he would go back in, and after he sprinkled, he would put it on the second pedestal. According to Tanakama, there were 2 pedestals in there. However, the Yehuda Omer, lo haya sham ela kan echad bilbad, natal et hapad v'niach dam ha'sa'ir. So since there was only, according to him, there was only 1 pedestal, that would mean that he's holding those sa'ir that he just brought. Now he has to switch. So he puts it down, and first he takes the pod, he's holding both, he puts down the blood of the sa'ir. And he needs the pod again because now he's going to sprinkle it on the parochet, or towards the parochet. So once he switches the 2, he takes it, and even though it says he puts it on the kaporet, apparently he doesn't put it on it, but rather towards it on the floor, and he does 1 and then another 7 when the same style, but this time he's in the Kodesh, facing the Kodesh Kodashim, right? There's the current separating the 2. And then he's going to go and take the dam ha'sa'ir. You see, this phrase is following the Yehuda, that there was only 1 pedestal. He's holding the dam of the pod. He takes the dam of the sa'ir, and then he puts down the dam of the pod, because only 1 pedestal, and then he does the same thing. With the dam sa'ir, hizam meno al parochet shekeneged Aaron mibachutz, achat lemala v'sheva lemata v'chule. And after he does both of those sprinklings, then he's actually going to mix them together. And he mixes it once, and then he puts the full into the empty to mix it back again so that they are both fully mixed. That is the Mishnah, and the Gemara. We went for a long time today, so we'll pick up on the Gemara tomorrow about what happened to the Aron. Baruch Adonai Olam, Amen, Amen.